looking at we're looking into hotels, and we're in the beginning stages of planning it, but we do have a date and a city. So July 29th through the 31st. And I will pass it off to Mark.
All right. Sorry, I hit the record button late, but you got the dates in properly. So I'm going to share this calendar with you. This is our January 2022 calendar. And I know there's some confusion. People don't know where to view this, but you can view it on our ALK Facebook group or our ALK-positive group. And for some reason, if you can't find it, just go ahead and private message me and I'll send you a copy. And I want to really pass it over to Summer. Summer did a survey way back when, for a couple months ago, about ALK Talks and what you guys would like to see in ALK Talks. So I'm going to pass over to Summer, and you can share some of the results.
Yes, so we did our survey. Thank you to all of you that participated. It was so helpful. And as we go ahead and schedule our ALK Talks for 2022, we definitely keep in mind your different suggestions and feedback. Of course, number one that came in was ALK-positive experts. We all are motivated by the hope and inspiration of research that they offer us. And then the next big runner-up was self-care and mental health. So we have been trying to work on that for you. In December, we had offered, or was it maybe late November, the gearing up for the holidays with some mental health strategies. And then we have met with Dr. Samuels and also Jenny Blender, another psychologist, a few times to come up with different mental health segments that we could bring throughout this year. So that is where we come with Dr. Samuels tonight. And Mark will be introducing her, but I do want to let you know we are still recording, and we went back and forth on this. You know, it's kind of a touchy subject. People don't like to necessarily advertise themselves as seeking mental health input. Although that is just a stigma, right? We're just all, it's just as important to take care of your mental health as it is to take your TKI or go for your chemo. But what we're gonna do is, so we are recording, you know, you can have your camera off, same as always. We switched the chat feature so that it does come in for us as anonymous, or not anonymous. So it will only come to Mark and I, or Mark, Gina, and I will be the only ones that will see your questions. So when we get to the question and answer portion with Dr. Samuels, we'll read those. If at some point you do want to speak up, you are more than welcome to. We had stopped recording during our last mental health segment, and I felt like we missed so much good information. So when we convert this to a YouTube video, I will go through and edit out people speaking in case you're uncomfortable with that. So please ask questions. Know that we're the only ones seeing them. Of course, I would air all my information out there, but I have issues, and that's why I'm here tonight helping to host. So, okay, thank you so much, Mark. Take it away.
All right, that's the way we kind of cut out Summer in some of these conversations. I'm joking, but anyways, what's interesting to me was that I got a phone call last year, and it was from Gina. Gina said that a doctor in our group contacted her through email, and she wanted to get involved, and so we started talking, Dr. Samuels and myself and Gina, about what she can bring to the group. So Dr. Samuels and I, we talked about maybe forming a roundtable group that meets in private. When I say private, it's not on the calendar. And we've met, I think, since May or June. And it's an amazing 12 of us. I think we get together once a month, and Dr. Samuels leads us on some interesting topics. And I believe that she will be offering a second group sometime in February. So, and if you can start the slide, Charelle. So Charelle, can you introduce yourself to the group? So until Summer finds it.
Hi. All right. I want to thank you, Mark, for inviting me to come to this, to give a talk. And I want to tell everyone that you are my technological advisor when it comes to Zoom. So that shows you how much I know. So Summer and Mark are brilliant compared to me. And I also want to thank my son, John, and my granddaughter for helping me create the slides that I'm going to be showing you tonight. You know, Summer was talking about the questionnaire that was circulated and that mental health was a popular topic they wanted to hear about, and self-care. You know, I think when we think about self-care, we generally think in terms of people being concerned about their bodies, exercise,
Hold on for
nutrition.
1 second, Dr. Samuels. Hey, Summer, can you back up the slideshow? Okay, there we go. Okay, Dr. Samuels, I'm going to cut you off. She did not want to put the slide up, but I told her that she should because it's a marvelous resume, and we're very, very fortunate to have someone of this caliber to lead our discussions. So go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, so what I was saying is that when we think of self-care, we don't usually think about taking care of our emotions. And how do we take care of our mental health? And I guess the question is, how do we cope with the additional stress that most of us are under that's associated with our illness? And how do we live with the emotional roller coaster that many of us are riding? Mark sometimes refers to me as one of us. And I like that because he's right. And while I consider myself an expert in my field because I have diagnosed and treated people for almost 50 years. Don't make me too old, Mark. But when I try to figure out how to deal with the changes that have happened in my life, in my emotions, as a result of my diagnosis, I'm finding it's not easy. In fact, it's really difficult. I wanted to share with you tonight some thoughts I have about how to do that, how to learn to take care of your mental health and cope with what's going on in your lives emotionally. The topics I'm going to discuss, we need another slide. This is topics, yeah, no. Oh, there it is. What are some of the emotional changes that we might be experiencing since our diagnosis? I want to talk a little bit about the physical and what's emotional. And finally, a subject that we all hear a lot about all the time, Scanxiety. And I'll talk about anxiety in general too. I'll bet that at some time or another, someone has said to you, don't get upset, don't cry. You don't have to feel so bad about that. It'll be all right. And in effect, what they're telling you is to ignore your feelings. But in fact, our feelings are very important and they give meaning to our experiences. Like if we were to see a stranger moving toward us with a gun, our hearts would start to beat rapidly, perhaps. So we would begin to, our muscles would contract. We'd have other reactions physically to what was going on. And it would be fear that we would be experiencing. It would give meaning to what that action was about. And this is important because we need that kind of reaction for our safety. And it might, in that situation, make us want to run. But when you add the thinking part of our brain to the equation, then you might notice that you're sitting in a movie theater, and in fact, there's no danger at all. So what I'm saying to you is that, this is another next slide, is that feelings are important, but we need to allow ourselves to have them, and they give meaning to our experiences, but we need to call upon the thinking part of our brain to decide what to do with those feelings. The goal is to use the feelings as a guideline, but then to use our thinking to tell us what to do. Next slide. I wanted to talk first about the emotional changes that many of us have experienced since our diagnosis. You know, before diagnosis, we had a fairly stable sense of ourselves. We kind of knew what sets us off, what makes us angry, what we do about it, and how it blows over, and we know that we'll be all right. So we were familiar with our emotional habits. It was part of what we define as, who am I? But as we moved relatively smoothly between our various emotions, we could feel secure in knowing who we were. Then what happened when we were diagnosed is that a lot of our emotional life changed significantly. We became most people, much more volatile, more angry, more sad, easily triggered, so that our emotions went to a much more intense register. That also included positive emotions, like people report that they are more easily touched by kindness, or they're more attuned to the things they're grateful for. But all of it, not yet, not yet, Summer. Can we go back? Yeah, but all of that intensity is a way of trying to cope with the increased significance of what we're experiencing. On the other hand, some people don't experience the intensity. They simply become numb. In addition to these changes that occur inside of us, of course, there are many outside changes too, like our plans for the future are shattered. Most people have ideas of what they want to do in their lives, but when after we're diagnosed, of course, those plans are all in question. Before, we were able to control our feelings, and now sometimes we feel out of control. There was a person who asked for help in our group. She said that she was having trouble dealing with her in-laws. She was the one taking care of the ALK patient, her husband, and her in-laws were finding fault with everything she did. And you could tell from what she said that she'd been trying very hard to give him the best possible care she could. And yet they could not be satisfied with anything she did. You could almost feel the desperation in what she said when she asked, "What should I do?" Well, answers came very quickly. People started to say things like, "Get rid of them. Throw them out. You don't need them in your life. You have enough to worry about." You know, when you think about it, we've all had situations in which we have had run-ins with members of our family, but we don't very often think about a solution of that register. So what you're seeing there is what not only happens to the family, but then it also happened to the people in our group responding to this woman. Everyone gets very intense about it. So they think, well, we should just get rid of those people. It's no wonder that this woman was having such a hard time. I find that many of my emotional struggles result from my attempts to try to fit into my old shoes, to try to be what I used to be. And when I do that, I fight with myself, or I fight with whoever's around. And when I'm able instead to be accepting of what's happened to me, then I can deal with things much easier. I've learned that acceptance helps a lot. And I started thinking about that family, the woman, her son, and her in-laws. And I thought if they could step back and take a look at what was going on, they might be able to realize that their son or her husband's diagnosis had had an impact on everybody, and that they were all in their own way reacting to what had happened. And then I think they'd have some understanding of one another and be able to handle the situation a little better. Now we can move on to the dog. Next slide. I wanted you to meet Gunner. Gunner, this is a mugshot that was taken when he was posing for his license as a certified therapy dog. I'd had him trained, and this is before my diagnosis. So I had him trained, and he and I used to go to the Hillman Cancer Center in Pittsburgh to visit patients once a week. The staff there would allow me and Gunner to go into some of the treatment areas, and I could watch Gunner perform his magic. Because what would happen is that when he would walk over to one of the patients, 9 out of 10 times, that person would start to smile. And if you want to know what that did, try it right now. Turn the corners of your mouth up, make yourself smile, and watch what happens in your body. Just try it now for a minute. Smile and see what happens inside of you. Well, if you've been successful at doing that, I think what you'll notice is that you become calm. You start to let down the tension that's in your body. And that's what Gunner was able to provide for those patients. And it made the patients tolerate the treatment better, and the people working with the patients having an easier time. So emotions play a very important part in our lives. And if emotions are so important, I wanted to take a look at a controversy that people in our group talk about frequently, which is, what about this fatigue that I have? Is it physical? Is it emotional? Or is it both? So I wanted Mark to set up a poll.
I think there's a
So that we
poll
could see-
up right now, isn't there?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So that we could see what you think about fatigue. What causes it? Is it emotional? Is it physical? Or is it both?
Sorry, it's number 2. So question number 2 is the one you're answering.
Right.
It's a big surprise. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So both is 78%. Physical is 13%. Emotional is 9%.
Right. And I think that's true. It's really very hard to tease out what's physical and what's emotional because they're so tightly intertwined. But I want to tell you what happened to me and my fatigue. Before I became ill, I was a fairly fit woman for someone my age. I walked a mile or two most days, and I did strength training twice a week. But after I was diagnosed, gradually I became more and more weak, and I lost my stamina. Even after trying to divide what I was doing into more days, like do half of it one day and half of it another day, I was too tired to do it. I took naps twice a day regularly. And of course, what those naps did was to control my life then, because I had to plan everything I did around my naps. And I worried a lot what was going to happen to my fitness and what about my life with this fatigue. And I was also unclear whether I was tired because of the emotional stress of having been diagnosed with cancer, or was I physically not able to do what I had done before, and I was expecting too much of myself. I had no way of knowing, or maybe I was just depressed, and I wanted someone to answer my question. Well, things started to turn around when our group started talking about palliative care, because what happened was it occurred to me that I should ask my oncologist to refer me to someone who could answer my questions. Should I be doing this exercise? Am I doing it? Am I doing myself harm? Or am I being too easy on myself? Or must I come to the realization that I really can't do these things anymore? He sent me to the pulmonary rehab center where I am treated. And they said they could answer those questions. They started me slowly exercising, hooked me up to a heart monitor, checked my blood pressure, my pulse, my oxygen level. They would ask me about my sense of my breathing, whether it was difficult or easy. They would ask me about how tired I was. And gradually, with them collecting all this data, it gave me the confidence to feel that I could do more than I thought I could. I became stronger and stronger. And finally, I found that I didn't need to nap so much. And I really felt empowered. And that feeling of empowerment affected not only my physical activity, but my life in general. Now, I wanted to talk to my oncologist about what had happened to me, because it really seemed very strange. And I asked him if maybe what happened to me was typical of someone who's been on alectinib for 2 years and has had no progression. Maybe that's what happens to these people. He said, no, that's not the case. And in fact, he thought that the emotional parts of this play a very important role. He said that many times he will treat a patient and he will consider what he has done a success, and they will not feel any better. And he attributes that to the fact that some people have difficulty coping with their feelings. And that gets in the way of them being able to take in the success that he has provided for them. So was I physically tired or emotionally tired? It's really hard to know because I think they both played a very important role. But I know that I felt more empowered and I was happier. And because I didn't have to sleep as much, I could have a life that's, at least to some extent, resembled my old life. And by the way, while I've been preparing this talk, I have to tell you, I've been more anxious than usual, and I had to nap more. So we need another slide. That's the slide for the poll. Go to the next one, please. Yeah, now this is Gunnar in his athletic shirt. He was not much of an athlete, but here he is preparing for the race for the cure. Now, perhaps you've noticed already that I'm using these dog slides as a way of trying to distract you a little bit. In some arenas, it's called comic relief. And what I'm trying to do is to move you away from the intensity of what we've been talking about to show you that you can step back from the intensity if you need to. And so I'm regulating that intensity by showing you these slides. If you become attuned to what's going on inside of you, you can learn to recognize when you've had as much as you want to tolerate of something. And then you can step back from it until you've had a little rest, and then you can go back to it again. So maybe now we can go back and we'll talk about Scanxiety. You know, this is one of the most popular topics that I read about in our group. And I want to start by talking about anxiety in general. We experience anxiety when a primitive part of our brain is activated in an attempt to cope with what feels like a danger. And it's been scientifically proven that regularly distracting yourself from anxiety-producing experiences not only isn't good for you, but it makes it worse. So what I'm saying is that it's important for you to learn to tolerate anxiety, and you can increase your tolerance for it. And at the same time, I was showing you with the slides that when you've had enough, you can move back and take a rest. So we can learn to increase our tolerance for anxiety-provoking situations, and it develops in us a capacity for confidence in ourselves. We learn that we can handle the things that come about. When we only distract ourselves from anxiety-provoking situations, then we discourage ourselves from having any confidence. So if you want to know how you might begin to do that, how would you begin to strengthen self-talk? And what I'm referring to is, you know, that chatter that we all get into in our heads. Sometimes it's that obsessive overthinking what we're going to do about something, and we repeat it again and again and again. Or maybe it's our self-criticism and we keep berating ourselves. Whatever it is, listen to your self-talk and get to know it. It's a wonderful way of helping you get to know yourself. And then what you can do is you can learn whether or not that self-talk is useful or not, if it's helping you. Sometimes a very popular kind of self-talk when we go to get our scans is to tell ourselves scary stories. We make up stories about what's going to happen in the future, what the results of the scan is going to be, and then what's going to happen. We visualize ourselves telling our partner, and we think about what are we going to do next, and we're off in greater and greater detail about something that we don't know will happen at all. And all it does is serve to scare us. So the important thing is to ask yourself, is this self-talk helping or not? And if it's not, you can change it. For example, if you find yourself doing one of those scary stories and you can notice it, then you might say, you know, that's making me feel bad. When in fact, I know I can handle this. And you know it because, for one thing, you've handled other frightening things and you've survived. And so you might think about that. Or you might say to yourself, it's okay to be afraid. Because you know that fear is a very normal thing that our primitive mind uses to protect us. It's okay. Or you might say, I can deal with whatever happens. With practice, you can learn to tolerate intense emotions. But sometimes our nervous system gets overloaded. And when that happens, it's time to back up a little bit. Like I had you back up in case this talk was beginning to overload you. I let you back up for a couple of minutes. And how would you do that? Well, if you find you're getting too overloaded with anxiety, you can listen to music. You can revisit a place you've gone on a vacation, let's say, where you have very calming, pleasant memories, and allow yourself to see if you can get back in touch with what that felt like so that you can remember feelings that are different from the ones you're having now. So if you can do that with as much detail as possible, that will also help you with your feelings. I wanted to say that I hope that what we're talking about tonight might give you something new to try the next time you're waiting for your scan. So in summary, what I'm saying about this is chronically avoiding anxiety-provoking situations not only doesn't produce growth, it makes things worse. Practicing self-awareness can help you tolerate anxiety-provoking situations and strengthen your coping skills. Self-talk can be disabling, like scary stories, or it can be calming, like it's okay to be afraid. I'll be okay. You know, the course our illness takes sometimes has a lot of hazards in it, but by practice, we can learn to improve not only our mental health, but the quality of our lives, regardless. Next slide. Sometimes people in Pittsburgh just can't tolerate the winters. Here I am distracting you again. Next slide. Well, so Gunnar was getting older And I thought I'd better start to train a new dog so I could still continue to take a dog to the Hillman Center. This is Sirius Black. In case you're wondering, his name came from a character in Harry Potter. And the character was a man who disguised himself as a dog. So this is Sirius Black. Next slide. So now I want to make some suggestions of things you can do to improve your mental health. So the first one is to increase your inner awareness. Now, we've been talking about that in terms of self-talk, but there's other inner awareness that might be useful for you to get in touch with. And by that, I mean checking in with your body. See how you're feeling. Are you tense? Are you calm? Are you anxious? What's going on inside? And how do you know that? Where do you feel it? So research has shown that if you take a few breaths and spend 10 minutes a day, just 10 minutes a day, doing what I'm describing, it will increase your coping skills over time. So it's really a worthwhile thing to do. The second thing I want to recommend is that you try to find ways to release tension. You know, once you start looking inside, you might find that you're more tense than you realized. So you need to find ways to release that tension. And it's whatever works for you. Some people go to the gym, some use yoga, some use meditation, some write in a journal, some watch a television show, some dance, whatever works. But they've also found that spending time outdoors in nature is particularly helpful. The third thing is to develop a network of friends. You know, we all need friends more now than ever before. And I say a network because it is unrealistic for us to imagine that we can have one friend who could meet all of our needs. Because, you know, it's like the person who you would never have a political conversation with might be the very best person to drive you to your appointments. So you need to establish a network. The other thing about friends, it's very important that you find at least one person that you can confide in, a confidant that you can talk to about your deepest feelings. The fourth thing is to give yourself permission to have fun, to seek pleasure. You know, doing the things that we enjoy is very important for us, and there's still room for it in our lives. It's been found that one of the most lasting ways to derive pleasure is to do something for somebody else. And also to notice the things you're grateful for. Because if you start to pay attention to what you're grateful for, you'll find there are really quite a few things. The intensity of our illness distracts us from noticing those things. It requires us to make an effort. But when we do, we find that there's so many things in life we can be grateful about. Next slide. So I wanted to finish my story. Gunnar was no longer able to be a therapy dog. And I became a patient at the Hillman Cancer Center where he and I used to go. Siri was too shy to become a therapy dog. He could not control his anxiety when he was in the presence of strangers. But he became my personal therapy dog, and he's great at it. Okay, I'd like to go to the next slide and talk about where to seek help. If you feel that you need further help, I think you ought to consider trying to find a therapist. There was a lot of talk at one time in our group about how you select a therapist. And many people thought that it was important to select someone who was a specialist in treating cancer patients. Well, someone might prefer to do that. But if I were choosing one, I would want someone who was interested in me, who wanted to understand me, and who cared about me. Someone who would be curious about what it's like to walk in my shoes. And the other thing I would do if I were selecting a therapist is that I would look for how I felt with them. In other words, what do my insides tell me about this person? Now, it might take more than one visit to make that determination. But, you know, I really think that's more important than considering the credentials that someone might have. If you're living in a remote area and having trouble finding help, you might go to the nearest university or college and see if their social work or psychology department can refer you to a therapist. And if that doesn't work, you might ask the social worker if there's a social worker where you're being treated who can help you find one. Or if there's a palliative care group, maybe they could help you with that. The second suggestion I have is for you to join or start a support group. I think you ought to pick one that's composed of cancer patients. And the reason is because otherwise, I think much of the talk that will go on in that group will not be as pertinent to you as other issues which you might want to be discussing. I should mention that, as Mark said, I'm going to be starting a second support group on Tuesdays at 11 o'clock till 12:30. It's going to be the last Tuesday of the month. It's going to start in February. It'll be a small group, 10, 12 people probably. And it's not the kind of a group where you can check in and check out. We're hoping that you will come whenever you can, because we want to get to know each other. If you have questions about the group, you can ask Mark, he can help you with that, or you can sign up if you're interested by letting Mark know you want to join. If there's one thing that I would want you to take away from this talk tonight, it is that while in some ways our illness makes us feel helpless and that we have no control, but in fact, we do have control of some things, and we can improve the quality of our lives and our mental health. In that respect, we are controlling our lives. Thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts with you, and I'll be glad to answer questions if I can.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Samuels. I'm sorry about all my technical glitches.
You did fine. You did fine.
We did really do a practice run and it worked. And then as I'm trying to admit people, I'm messing up the slides. So I do apologize. But that was so helpful. And I took so many great notes. And we do have also lots of questions for you that came in the chat. Mark has those though, because I was scared to touch my screen. So he does have those, but I love your takeaway that we do have control. And I think that that is so huge, because I think a cancer diagnosis, you feel like your life has spun out of control. Yeah, and I think too, the mindset is another huge takeaway. I've read lots of books about just negativity attracts negativity, and one negative thought just seems to pull you under because you feel like you're drowning. So
Yes.
yeah, that was so helpful. But Mark, do you want to read some of our questions?
Sure. Going back to the emotional slide, this person asked, my emotions trickles over to my thoughts. People say live each day, and I can't because I'm scared and I want to learn how to enjoy my life.
I think the most important thing that you can do is to get in touch with your body and spend some time with yourself and let yourself just get to know what's going on inside of you, as I was describing it before. That's frightening to do. And when you feel that way, and it feels like it's too much, you can stop. If you can just let yourself get to know what's going on inside of you, I think you'll find that you can develop strength to handle that fear.
Okay, question number 2 is, I feel like so many parts of me have been taken away. I think this is more physical. I want to feel whole again. Is there a way to obtain that?
That's a good question, you know, because many of us feel assaulted by things that have happened to us in our treatment, in the efforts of our doctors to help us. But you know, if you can allow yourself to focus on what you have rather than what you don't have, I think you'll discover you have more than you realize.
So to follow up on that answer, would you say to accept the new you?
I'm sorry, I missed what you said.
To accept the new you, to look in the mirror and say, I accept who I am.
Well, yes, but I think the way that happens is more that when you aren't accepting who you are and you start to get into a battle about it, that's when you notice it. And that's a time when you can say, wait a minute, I can't do that anymore. What can I do?
Okay, I like that, because what you're flipping around, you're basically loving yourself up and saying, these are my good qualities right now, and it's made me into who I am today.
Yeah, you know, Mark, we can easily get consumed by negative things. There's so much around us that it's not hard at all. The idea is that they are there. That's how it is. But there are other things too. You don't have to allow your disease to define you. You're more than that disease.
And what is your opinion about antidepressants and other drugs?
Well, I think you ought to talk to a psychiatrist to have an evaluation to see whether or not they feel that medication of that sort would be helpful. For some people, it works very well, and for others, not so much. So I think it's really specific to the individual.
Okay, Summer, those are my questions that I have. I know that you were taking notes. Is there anything else you want to add?
And I was thinking too, like medication you talked about, I like took notes and just said like heliotherapy, light therapy. I didn't know. Your winter one made me think of that, but I know my daughter just left for school and she's like, it's just gray here. I'm like, find lights, find sun. But I don't know if that was it isn't really a strategy. No, and I loved with the dog pictures. I thought that was great. And I don't know about all of you, but when she's telling us to smile and how does that make you feel? And it does, it's like an automatic content thing. And I do have to say too, for those of you that don't know me, I do have a son with severe cerebral palsy who is 21. And so when I first met Mark and Debbie and people from art therapy, one of the things that we talked about was, did cancer change you? And did it change your perspective? And actually I was a little bitter and was like, I didn't need to learn these lessons. But I think that mindset is huge. And I kind of always was a more positive, but like different things, different strategies you were talking about were definitely, I think, how I always acted with my son. Like I can't totally, I could control as much as I wanted about that he could not speak or he could not walk, but what are the things that I can control? And I just think that out of control feeling with cancer and when any hurdle in life is such a drowning feeling. So I feel like I've had practice for 21 years implementing these strategies. So
Let me share with you a funny story about this. When I was diagnosed, my son urged me to visit Dr. Shaw to get a second opinion right away. And I did that. And when we were flying home, he said to me, maybe you ought to think about joining a support group. And my reaction was, who, me? Are you kidding?
Right.
Right. And what happened was, as I allowed myself to stay with that question and just let it stay there, I began to have thoughts about it, like maybe I'm just afraid of what I'm going to hear when people start talking about the illness. And as soon as I began to change how I thought about it in that respect, I kept moving closer and closer to, I really need this.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And with my experience with my son, my background is special education. So similar to you, that I was like, I don't really need a support group, even though it was a whole different way of life. And with him, I didn't really do support groups, but yet with all of you, it's like you're my second family. And I might say hello to my husband and my kids, but then I'm immediately checking into Facebook to see who I can support or who I can gain support from, because we can have this supportive network in our families around us, but still I feel like nobody knows what you're living or the crazy thoughts that might be in your mind. So when you said that too at the end, about finding a support group, I do think that's key. And I think with Zoom, Gina teased it as you were talking, was like, I tried to have a support group. Gina, I'm outing you. I hope that's okay. Poor Gina said, I tried to have a support group and I made my cookies every week and people didn't come. And I said to Gina, I don't know if I would come to your support group, Gina, because I'm a commitment phobe and I don't know that I would leave my house. But this with Zoom too is so huge, because you don't have to leave your house. You don't have to take you show your face if you don't want to. You can just listen, you can whatever. And I think that that's another huge thing, which is why we really work with ALK Talks and the Healing Arts Calendar, is to offer those things so that make it easy and accessible. And yeah, but I don't know if anybody wants to verbally ask a question or unmute yourself and give a wave, or anybody want to say anything to Dr. Samuels? Don't be shy. I can edit you right out.
Hi. Hi. How are you? I'm Debbie Friedman.
Hi, Debbie.
And hi, how are you doing? First of all, I think this was great. I'm sorry I came in late. And I'd be very interested in talking about to see if there's room in the new support group that the doctor's running. Because I too felt the same way and have felt the same way about not going to in-person support groups that they had before COVID. And I did go once, and it was a scary experience, I have to say. It really was, because
What
people
scared you?
people talking about how sick they were and how scared they were of dying.
Ah,
And it was, I spoke to the social worker after that time, and I said, is it always like this? And she goes, happened to be a really bad day. Everybody was a mess, losing jobs, couldn't work, there was not one happy thought. And I think I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't ready for that. I didn't like the negativity. I didn't hear anybody talking about something positive. So that maybe it wasn't the right place, or that was just a bad day. But I'm very open and think that I would love to have, be part of a group.
I think that it was also the wrong intensity. What I
Yeah.
was saying before about getting overloaded. It's,
Yeah.
you just dove into the deep end first thing. You
Right.
didn't even put your toe in to see what the water temperature was.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. So I didn't go back, and that was almost 3 years ago.
Right.
So,
But you can decide how much you can take and how much is too much.
right. Yeah. So anyway, I was very happy to hear you talk about that, and how you also had said, me, I don't need that. I don't know. I'm also like, I'm so self-sufficient and I'm so tough and this and that, but it's true. I really would really need and want to be able to talk to people who also have lung cancer and can, understand how I feel.
I have to add on something that is, we're a special breed. I went to a cancer group for about 8 years in Detroit, and all different types of cancer, but no one had a scan every 90 days, and that makes a huge difference. And our support groups that we do during the week, we talk about things, and our death cafes, we talk about things that are just, it brings out emotions that are not always negative. There's a lot of positive things that we talk about and we speak about. And Dr. Samuels, since you've been in a group setting before with people with ALK exclusively, what can you say about that? The differences maybe between the normal cancer group and our type of groups that we run.
Well, I think you've identified the most significant thing. And that's what I was thinking about when I was talking about the emotional roller coaster that we're all riding. Because we all, in whatever style we use, gear up for the coming scans. And so that affects our lives from the time we start preparing, and whatever that amount of time is, through the whole events. It's, I have to think about what else is unique to us. I guess the other thing, of course, is that there's no cure.
Gina has a question. Gina, you can unmute.
I was just wondering, I know that I personally have gone through, and I think roller coaster is the perfect analogy, but I've just been through so many different times. I was wondering if you think it's best for us to, I guess, get support from people who are at the same point in the journey as we are, or do you think it's good for people from, all different points of the journey to to talk about how it changes. I mean, and your emotions and everything with this changes. So I was just wondering if you think it's better for us to kind of like get support from people who are this at the same place as we are, or just mix and match ALK-positive people.
Well, you know, I think it is really a very individual choice. But the most important thing is that you find people that you can talk to candidly. So it isn't so much where they are in the process as it is how comfortable do you feel like saying very intimate things to that person. Is that helpful?
So I think we came across this point at one of our meetings, and that is, you know, I've been living with this cancer for over 8 years, where other people are newly diagnosed. So I think we have the same type of questions, but maybe have more time to process these questions. I think that's what Gina's alluding to, you know.
More than anything, though, people seem to have problems sometimes confiding in family members. That becomes an issue. And I think the reason is because in many cases, the family member is having difficulty tolerating the conversation. So that if you're talking to someone who is a peer of yours, in the respect that they're dealing with the same thing, they can work with you better sometimes than a family member.
The other thing too I want to note is when we do go into this group, you sometimes don't talk. You know what I'm saying? You just sit back and nod, and then you interject once in a while. But we seem to have answers for each other as we speak to each other. And it's a little different than when you type onto a Facebook page, because you don't get the same response. So there's a huge difference between a typed response versus a verbal response. And it's so much more powerful when you get these relationships with people. And that's what I want to really plug for this talk. And since you've been in these, I mean, would you agree, or what's your opinion?
You're asking me?
Yeah, I'm putting you on the spot. It's you.
Yeah, no, no, that's all right. You know, I find that these groups, I'm thinking about the group that you and I are in, which is the other group that I'm running. I find it remarkable how connected people begin to feel with one another, even though we're so far apart. That because of the technology, we can be together and share experiences, and people are able to do that and to talk very candidly about what's going on with them. And they help each other. You know, in the talk, I was saying that helping one another is a way of really deriving some pleasure. I think that's one of the things that, and I'm speaking for the members of my group, and I might be wrong, but I think that's one of the things they derive from being in that group. They feel, some of them, that they're helping the other person. And that feels really good.
You got a question that just came in that it's really a deep question, and it kind of can almost take up its own talk itself, and that is talking about death with your family members. You know, how do you do that? How do you balance that? You know, like when, you know, some people are could be in denial in your family, or some people could be asking constantly. What's that balancing act? You know, would you give any advice to somebody?
You know, that's a very good question, but it's really complex. Because I think you have to look at the individual circumstances. I mean, I can think of so many possibilities depending upon the particular person and their capacity to hear what you have to say. You know, some people characteristically run away from painful things, like I was saying, and they have never strengthened that muscle that could make them tolerate what they have to hear. So for them, you know, I think I'm not inclined to put it in their faces. On the other hand, if there are situations where it's necessary for you to do that, like here, I want you to know who are the people I want you to call if I die. Well, I guess you have to do that. So, I mean, there's just so many variables involved. It's really hard to generalize.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty deep question, and it's hard to discover in a 2.5 minute answer. But it's a difficult situation that we talk about a lot in our Death Cafe, and you know, I think that people poo-poo some of these small little groups that we have, but they give so much support for everybody, and I can tell from myself. I mean, it's kind of replaced my own friends. I don't even talk to my friends anymore. I just talk to my ALK friends. I'm laughing because, you know, the connections are really unbelievable. But I know it's 8:15 and we kind of, you know, typically go over our 15 minutes, but I appreciate your time that you put in and that you stepped up to the plate and that you asked to help out. I'm sure there's a lot of people on this call who would be willing to offer their services. And in many ways, Bill's still on the line, and you know, we need all the volunteers we can get. If someone has an idea for an ALK talk, they can contact Summer, myself, Gina, and we can make it happen. And any final words for the group?
You'll feel really good if you offer to help. That's one of the reasons I'm doing it. It makes me feel very good. And I appreciate your listening.
Thank you. And thank you, Summer, for the presentation. So.
I tried. Dr. Samuels, this was so wonderful, and you're so soothing to listen to. I don't know about the rest of you, but I was just jotting down ideas, and it was so relaxing. And yeah, and thank you everybody who did join in. I think, you know, we'll definitely put this on YouTube, so spread the words, tell your friends.
And next week we have a big ALK talk, and then your father, Ray Hall, and yourself will be hosting New Valent.
Daughter Dad Duo coming up next week, everybody.
And what is the topic?
New Valent, you could go into that. I haven't really done my homework yet, but
New Valent has a drug coming out in trial. New Valent 655. I did a couple postings on it. It's exciting. It's a 5th generation TKI, and they came out with the ROS1 that just got launched, and they're launching their ALK inhibitor shortly. So tune in next Sunday. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Dr. Samuels, and everyone else who commented. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Dr. Samuels.
Thank you. God bless you, Summer.
Thanks, Summer. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Summer, thanks for your help.
Thank you.
And
It was
Mark,
really
too.
great.
Thank you.
Very much.